organized our session today into two parts. First, an overview of who we are, what we fund, and how we fund, and then we'll review our application process and take a look at the 2022 grant application together. There have been changes made to the application this year, so if you've applied in the past, you're going to want to note our intention was to make the process as seamless as possible, and we did our best to be receptive to some comments we've received in the past from our applicants. And so there's reduced word count, reduced number of questions, and we've shifted our platform a bit, and you'll hear more from me and Louise in a bit about those changes for 2022. Our hope for today is that you'll walk away with a better understanding of our eligibility requirements, our priorities, and the nuts and bolts of how to apply for a Garden State grant. All right. And I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble here. Here we go. So the impact concept is the power of one multiplied by many. Each year, our members' donations of $1,000 each are pooled to award high-impact grants of $100,000 to nonprofits selected through our rigorous review and democratic voting process. Members actively participate in our grants process, and every member has a vote on how our collective contributions will be used. 100% of member donations are used to fund grants. Some members and our sponsors contribute to our modest operating expenses, which include our use of the Community Foundation of New Jersey, and CFNJ serves as our back office, as Impact 100 Garden State is organized as a donor-advised fund. There are 65 impact chapters across the globe, awarding over $90 million since the impact model's inception in 2001. And in a bit, I'm going to put in the chat other impact chapters in New Jersey. So there's 3 other Impact 100s in New Jersey, and if your organization meets those requirements and serves those counties, you may be interested in looking into their process as well. Since our Garden State founding in 2013, our chapter has awarded over $2.4 million in grants. And last year, we were thrilled to be able to award 3 $100,000 grants and 7 merit grants to finalists of $8,000 each. We were founded with the mission to provide transformational funds to organizations that reach underserved populations, to raise the profile of those that are deserving but lesser known, and to highlight unmet needs in our 5 focus areas. We strive to meaningfully engage women in philanthropy, provide opportunities for our members to learn more about nonprofits and the needs and assets within our targeted communities, and also provide opportunities for nonprofits to connect with our civically engaged members. We want you to know that we're committed to a fair and equitable process. We take this very seriously. Our leadership team and those closest to the grants process all sign non-disclosure agreements, which means we protect applicant data and keep information and review decisions confidential when we're in that review phase. In addition, each of us signs conflict of interest statements when part of the application review process. This means that if we have personal relationships with the applicants, we will not review and rate those applications. We functionally recuse ourselves from those reviews and discussions. And these sorts of relationships may look like volunteer roles, serving as staff. We have a number of staff members from nonprofits who are also members, which is an incredible strength of ours, and we're also really mindful of that too as we review our grants. Another way that we might recuse ourselves is if we have made contributions to the organizations in the past. So again, we take this really seriously, and Cindy will share more about the different steps in our process, and then the information that we do share once we go through that review process and have determined the finalists for our membership vote. All right, let me also say welcome to those who came in a little past 10:30 a.m. As you have questions or comments, please feel free to put that in the chat, either directly to me, Jennifer Avers, or my co-chair, Cindy Fleischer, if you'd like to keep that private. If not, feel free to chat with everyone, and we will do our best to get to your questions at the end of the session. All right. Okay, so I'm going to jump into our eligibility requirements. To be eligible for our grants, organizations must serve at least one of our 5 targeted counties. That's Morris, Passaic, Somerset, Sussex, Union, and be either new programming or an expansion of an existing program. Requests may include, and that expansion could be replication, amplification, perhaps using another site. Requests may include making necessary improvements to infrastructure to support new or expanding programs. Requests may fund capital expenditures or equipment that are part of a new program or a program expansion, which could be to add services or reach more people. These sorts of capital expenditures may look like construction, vehicles, or technology, perhaps due to COVID, as long as that is directly tied to the program for which you're requesting funding. Joint programs are also eligible, and we define joint as including a lead organization and a partner organization, the two of which work together to implement the proposed program. With a joint program, we disperse grant checks to those two organizations, and therefore all of the financials required for the lead organization are also required for that partner organization, and you'll hear more from Susan about those financial requirements a little later today. We also accept applications for programs that are collaborative in nature, where only one nonprofit applies for our funds and then may allocate portions of that grant, the proposed grant, to other collaborating nonprofit entities or contractors. And thus, the applicant serves as the fiscal agent who disperses the grant to those collaborators. And in those cases, we don't need financials from your collaborators, but we do need to understand those relationships and need those clearly described in your proposal, and Louise will speak to this a bit more later. And any critical memorandums of agreement provided for us to then move forward with vetting that request and bringing it to our membership if you were to make it to that finalist stage. So one example, just to give you kind of a concrete example of what this collaboration might look like, you may be a children and family service agency working with school districts. You may be allocating portions of your proposed budget to supplies for staff, contracting with you in the school district to implement that program. And this is reasonable and eligible. We just need to understand those relationships and see documentation that those relationships are in place. And again, you'll hear more on this a bit later. Okay. We do not fund debt reduction, interim or bridge financing, endowment, or private foundation funding. Garden State does not fund general operating expenses as defined kind of rigidly, but any funding request, excuse me, must be directly tied to the proposed new project or expanded program. So while program-related expenses like staff salaries, rent, and other supplies are eligible, we will not fund the recurring costs for the whole organization. So just be very clear to tie your budget lines to the program directly in your request to Garden State. Our chapter will not consider any programs that are political, partisan, or religious in nature. This does not mean that we wouldn't consider requests from churches providing services, for example, nor does it mean we won't consider requests from nonpartisan groups doing civic engagement work in one of our focus areas. We just need to know that that request is open to all, and participation does not require affiliation of any sort. Okay. Applicants must be classified as a 501c3, provide reviewed or audited financials and Form 990s, regardless of your annual gross revenues, and must agree to sign a grant agreement if chosen as a recipient. Again, you'll hear more about these requirements in detail a bit later. Please also know that if you're awarded a grant, you will not receive that $100,000 grant right away after the announcement. This is an ongoing relationship developed with the grant administration team, and Lori will share a bit more with you about that relationship and our expectations. All right, we define 5 focus areas or grant categories, and these are pretty broad. We understand that for many of you, your requests may easily fall across one or more of these categories. New this year, we do not ask that you designate just one focus area. So this is a change from the past. Rather, we ask that you certify that your request falls in at least one of the categories. So this is also in response to what we heard from our nonprofit applicants, that at times it was difficult to discern what category was most appropriate for the request. And so we have made this change and want you to feel empowered to submit your requests, and that we understand that your programs may fall across some of these categories. So just need to make sure that they fit at least within one. And I'll read these focus areas for you now just to give you a sense of our definition. Again, these are fairly broad, and you can find these definitions on our website as well. Under arts and culture, programs that develop, cultivate, or enhance the cultural and artistic climate. Under children and families, programs that strengthen or enhance the lives of children and families. Under education, programs that advance or improve learning opportunities for children and or adults. In our area, environment, preservation, and recreation, and we hope for those of you who serve in this area that you'll consider applying. For everyone, of course, we don't always tend to see as many in the environment, so we want to make a extra plug for the environment. Programs that restore, conserve, or improve natural surroundings and resources, including for recreational use, improve the welfare of animals, preserve buildings and structures, or support research, public awareness, or education relating to the environment. So that's another pretty broad one. And then finally, health and wellness, programs that improve the physical and or mental well-being of people. All right, so now I'm going to hand things over to my colleague and pal, Cindy Fleischer, who's going to walk us through the grant process.
Thanks, Jen. Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Fleischer, and as Jen mentioned earlier, she and I are co-chairs of the Nonprofit Outreach Committee for Impact 100 Garden State. I am so honored to be here today with you to review this application process. What I'm going to do today is walk you through about 8 slides that give you a high-level overview of our 2021-2022 grant application process, which you can see here on the screen. In the next few slides, I will provide an overview of each of these topics in greater detail. Later in today's program, each of these topics will be discussed in more detail from people who are responsible for those particular activities. As we go through these steps, keep in mind that there will be another information session in January where we will take a more interactive approach to the application, and we are open to suggestions on content. So here we see our grant application and award process. Please note the key activities and dates that are listed here. These are the key dates and milestones that you will experience as you move through our application and award process. So to begin the process, our grant application is now available and can be found on our website. Later in the program, Jennifer will walk you through the online application process in greater detail. As you can see, the application must be fully submitted by February 4th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Once all applications have been received, the Impact 100 Garden State Grant Committees will convene and the review process will begin during the months of February and March of 2022. Simultaneously and into April, our Financial Review Committee will be reviewing the financial information that's been submitted along with each application. Once the Grant Review Committee has completed the review and the site visit candidates have been selected, site visits will be scheduled in the month of April. After the site visits have been completed in April, the Grant Review Committees will again meet to select the finalists who will move forward for a vote of our general membership. Grants are then awarded during the 9th annual awards meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the June 9th annual awards meeting. Once the grants have been awarded, each recipient is assigned a grant liaison who follows the distribution of funds and the administration of the grant throughout the life of the grant. As a reminder, grants can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years in duration. Impact 100 Garden State governs this through the Grant Administration Committee. It's important to reiterate that funding is not provided at the annual awards meeting, but is provided in increments and allocated over time. The terms and amounts of distributions are agreed upon by both the Grant Administration Committee and the nonprofit organization during the grant process. Granting funds will be dispersed for use in the grant implementation over a 1 to 3 year period. So let's take a look at each of these steps in further detail. In the second part of our session, we will provide some additional details. So the application, it's now open and can be found on our website. So be sure to submit application material electronically by 5 p.m. on Friday the 4th of 2022. Please do not submit additional promotional materials, but providing links within the application is acceptable. Remember to use the Save Progress option as you move through the online application. Step 2, the grant committee review. After the close of the grant application period on February 4th, the grant review committees are convened. Each grant review committee member is trained in our grant review process. Our grant review committees will then meet to review all of the applications during the month of February and March. Impact 100 Garden State's evaluation guidelines mirror the application, and a rubric is used to aid in the evaluation process. Once the grant review committees have made their selections, qualifying applications are sent to the Financial Review Committee. In mid-April, those applications not moving on to the next phase will be notified. Step 3, the Financial Review Committee. Once applicants have been selected for further review, an independent Financial Review Committee examines the submitted financial information. If necessary, the committee will reach out to your financial contact for additional or clarifying information. That's why it's so important to have contacts noted in your application. Approved applications are then returned to the grant committee for selection of site visit candidates, which is the next phase. Step 4 is the site visits. Applicants selected for a site visit are notified in late March and no later than mid-April. Typically, site visits can be up to approximately 2 hours in duration and will take place throughout the month of April in 2022. They may be virtual unless the nonprofit and grant review team feel comfortable about conducting them in person. In preparation for the visit, you will receive support from a site visit team leader. Site visits are intended to help committee members get to know the program manager and leadership of your organization. During the site visit, grant review committees representatives will review outstanding questions, either programmatic or financial, and they will complete their due diligence as stewards of members' funds. Step 5, finalist selection. All Impact 100 Garden State members receive finalist information and will vote electronically. Votes are tallied prior to the annual awards meeting with an independent accountant verification. It is important to note that voting is independently verified by volunteer accountants, which is our version of an audit. So we don't know who the winners are at the annual award meeting until they're announced. Finalists are given guidance for award presentations through the month of May, including preparation of their videos, narrative summaries, and wish lists. Awards and celebration. We plan to hold our annual awards meeting on June 9th, 2022. At this meeting, our leadership team will announce the grant recipients. Members will sign in to hear the acceptance speeches presented by the grant recipients. And at this time, recipients enter into the grant agreement process, which is an ongoing relationship with Impact Garden State Grant Administration team. Funding is not distributed that evening. However, the grant administration process will begin. Finalists and grant recipients, finalists and grant recipients' program summaries and wish lists will remain on Impact 100 Garden State's website for members and the public to view and review. To date, we have awarded grants to 22 organizations.
Thank you, Cindy. And as Jen and Cindy have indicated, the Grant Administration Committee will get involved with recipients once it's announced that you have received $100,000 award from us. However, despite the fact that we will likely ask you to pose with the ubiquitous foam check, you will not walk away with $100,000 that evening. Instead, we will pair you with a grant administration committee member that we call a liaison to work with you to work through the grant agreement and all of the exhibits associated with that. And one of the first decision points that your organization will need to make if you're a recipient is how long your grant period is going to be. And per the contract, you can indicate up to 1 to 3 years, or as we like to say, 4 to 12 quarters, because we're going to journey with you through your grant period on a quarterly basis. So you will get very familiar with your liaison. This individual will represent our committee and work closely with you to answer questions and concerns you have, help you devise the milestones that you're going to have to develop for each quarter and the budget. And the milestones are the key activities, outputs, and outcomes that are deemed critical for the successful completion of the program that our members have decided to fund if you're chosen as a recipient. So our liaisons will work closely with you through that process so that by the end of July, you're going to receive your first distribution of funds. So that's an important thing to remember. So be thinking about that. And we always advise our recipients that the first place you should look when you are starting to put together your milestones in your budget, go back to your own application, because in your application, as you work through that, you're going to see opportunities to identify what are your milestones? What are the things that have to happen in order for you to show us that you are in fact moving through your grant period, that your program is making progress, and that you're leading to, which we are confident will be ultimately success. Another thing I want to mention to you that we at Grant Administration, representing our entire organization, want to stress that we want every single recipient to be successful, and we are going to walk alongside you and partner with you to support you and ensure that that happens. In addition to providing ongoing support each quarter, we're going to be actively looking for opportunities to promote your successes related to your impact funded program on Impact's social media and other communications channels. And that is another conversation you'll be having with your liaisons on an ongoing basis, always looking for opportunities to promote your organization's impact funded program, because truly when you become a $100,000 recipient, you become part of the Impact 100 Garden State family, and we want to support you towards success with your program. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jen.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks for your patience, everyone. I've got a possessed PowerPoint today, so thank you for bearing with me. I'm going to keep us on this view for now, just so it doesn't go rogue again. So as Cindy and others have mentioned already, this is the exciting slide. So the process is important. This is where we get to celebrate what collective giving has done. So this gives you a snapshot of the 22 organizations that have been awarded $100,000 grants from Garden State. So we're so pleased to get to know these nonprofits closely and deeply, and support their work. And we look forward to the applications coming in this season, and know that you're in good company as you make your requests. Okay, so now we're going to dig in. Cindy, yes.
Yeah, I just thought it might be good to point out here that some of the applicants have applied up to 2 to 4 times before receiving an award. So if you've applied before, please don't give up.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes, wonderful. Okay, so let's dig in to the nitty gritty here. So we're going to talk about some resources on our website. We're going to walk you through the application step by step, and then share some final tips, and then open up for discussion. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to go to our website. And if you are on a phone, you're going to see that the grants tabs are actually at the bottom if you're looking on mobile. If you're on a desktop, you're going to see our grant tabs to the right. And you'll see that there are tabs that say grants, process and dates, FAQs, apply, and then also grant recipients. So please take a look at those closely. It's chock full of information. And you can also take a look at, in greater detail, those who we funded in the past. We also encourage you to reference the application before you begin entering information. You'll see that we've moved to data-filled form entry for the program narrative this year. But before you do so, there is a place where you can print the application, and we suggest that you may prepare. I know a lot of you are already wizards in all of this, grant writers and staff, to prepare that in a Word document, which would allow you to check your word count and make sure ideally that you can just easily copy and paste into our platform when you are ready to submit. Also, we'll have a recording of this session. We have a recording of the October session, which is very similar to this. And then as Cindy mentioned, we have a January session that is really tailored for those organizations preparing their applications with any questions, final things that you want to confirm with us. It's going to be much more interactive than this session or the October session. And then also, please reach out to us for help at any time, whether it's any technical challenges you may be having. We sure hope you don't have any, but if you do, you're going to want to reach us at grants@impact100gardenstate.org. And again, questions about eligibility, feel free to do that. We're not able to give, guidance around particular program requests, given, our commitment to be fair and equitable. And we have a mix of reviewers each year using that rubric that Cindy mentioned to make those decisions. But again, if it's eligibility, tech, just kind of checking in, temperature check on what you're requesting, feel free to reach out to us at grants@impact100gardenstate.org. Okay, so when you are on our website and you see that grants tab, you're going to want to go to the apply tab and then choose access the grant application. You'll see that right here. Once you go in to apply, this is the area that I mentioned. This is where you can preview the form as well as print the form and prepare your responses based on that form. You'll also need to register. Even if you've registered in the past, you're going to want to clear your web browsers. Again, reach out to us if you have any challenges here. We hope that you don't. We suggest that you use Chrome. That seems to be the most optimal. Others have been successful with other browsers, but that one seems to do the trick for most. Once you've registered, you're going to get receipt that you've registered, that the system knows who you are and that you're going to log in, and then you'll put those login credentials here and be able to access the application. All right, and before I turn things over to Louise to walk through the 2022 application in detail, just want to give you a high-level view of the application, kind of how it's organized. Again, for those who have applied in the past, we still have a general information section and organization background. New this year, rather than a separate program attachment or PDF, this information, the information we're requesting about your program, is going to be captured in data cell entry, much like the general information and the organization background. So it's one platform. And then we still have the requirements around financial statements, and Susan will walk you through those in a bit. And then there's also the attachments of the program budget, those financials, the C3 tax letter, and a list of your board members along with their qualifications and titles. All right, so now I'll hand things over to Louise to walk through the application in greater detail.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we're not able to see our faces. Is that it? Okay. So
we can see your face.
Oh, wonderful. Okay,
yeah.
Well, I'm delighted to be here in this distinguished company. And, if we were in person, I think I might suggest that we get up and take a big stretch, because we've certainly had a lot of very substantive information shared by my colleagues. My role today is to walk through the application with the exception of the budget material, which my colleague Susan Altman will preview. As Jennifer said, we have 5 sections. The eligibility requirements are included here because we want to offer everyone the opportunity for one last check to see if it's worth filling out a complete application. I'd like to move into the more substantive area of what we're calling section 2 of the application. And in that part of the application, we want to learn about your overall organization so that we can have a better context for understanding your proposal. Okay, so here is the general information, the way it looks on the screen. All grants will be for $100,000. We ask you to verify that your proposal can fall into one of the 5 funding categories we have. We ask where your program will be operating, and you can check one or more of the 5 counties we serve. In brief, we serve Morris, Passaic, Somerset, Sussex, and Union counties. It may be that your agency headquarters is outside one of our 5 counties. That's fine, as long as the services for which you're seeking our funding are being delivered in Morris, Passaic, Somerset, Sussex, and/or Union counties. So thank you. We can move to the next slide. And here we're asking for a lot of contact information at the beginning. We want to know obviously your organization name, and if your legal name is different, your EIN number, so we can verify that you are a 501c3. So we can move now. And more contact information. I'd like you to call your attention to question 2. We want to know about your organization's mission statement and include a brief history of the organization. And we are wanting brevity here because there is a 150-word maximum to this question. But again, we want to better understand the organization as we review your proposal. And now question, again, more contact information. I know that my colleagues in the Financial Review Committee may want to reach out to your chief financial officer, so we ask for that person's name. And this year, we've added a new contact person from whom we're seeking information, and that is, who do you want us to call if we have any specific questions about the grant proposal? It may not be appropriate, given your organizational setup, for us to reach out to your executive director. Here's your opportunity to identify the specific person who can answer any questions we have about the grant proposal. So thank you. We also ask you to report the number of full-time employees at your organization, the number of part-time employees, and the number of volunteers, as well as the current budget. Again, there are no right or wrong answers here, but we are finding that if we know a little bit about your organization, that information is very helpful for us to better understand the proposed program for which you're seeking funding. So that's why we ask this information. We can move to the next. We're also interested in the financial stability of your organization. So we ask that you identify the 5 funding streams that were the most were the highest in the last 2 years. And if you are relying on fewer than 5 funding streams, we ask you to just write none and 0 in these text fill boxes. Here is your opportunity to brag, because question 7 asks, what were the organization's most significant achievements in the past 2 years? The fact that you're participating in this call today indicates that you were able to pivot and continue your operations during a worldwide pandemic. We want to know what you've done. If you have other significant accomplishments, this is your time, an opportunity to let us know all the wonderful work you're doing. And because we're so interested in your significant accomplishments, we are providing for a 275-word maximum, because we really want to, again, understand all the good work that you're doing. So thank you. Now we move into the section 3 on the proposed program. This is, we want to understand what you would do with $100,000 should you receive a grant. We'll begin by asking you what the title of your program is, and to give a very brief 25 words or less program summary. This obviously is a soundbite, but again, having that soundbite will help us all get our heads on to, if you will, to understand your proposal. Our third question is, again, helping us to understand your program proposal. And that is, we want to know whether this application is for a new or pilot program, or whether you are seeking funds to expand a successful program. I really like to emphasize that there are no right or wrong answers to question 3. We ask again so that we can better understand your individual proposals. Question 4 asks about the specific needs that your program proposal will address. Here, I'd like to emphasize that we are really interested in data at the ground level. We're really not interested in learning about national statistics about our pressing social problems. We want to know very specifically how you have determined that you need funding. For example, do you have a waiting list? Does one of your collaborating nonprofits with whom you work have a waiting list and you want to serve? Have you had other opportunities to identify unmet needs in your community? And cite that. The more local, the more targeted to specific communities, the stronger response you'll have to this question 4. Question 5 asks you very basically, how are you going to spend impact money? Are you going to hire staff? Are you going to supplement the salaries of existing staff? Are you going to buy some equipment? And what purpose would that equipment serve? Again, and with regard to staff, what is it they will be doing? Very direct answers about how you would spend impact funding. Question 6 says, what steps will you take to implement the program, and what is your timeline? And as we mention here, please feel free to use bullet points. What will you do in the first quarter? Will you train staff? Will you go purchase equipment? What is the length of time for which you'll be providing services? Will you have a conclusion part of your program? what are the steps you will take? And as finalists know, the applicant's responses to question 6 will be a direct entree into negotiating with the grants administration liaison to receive funding as you meet certain milestones. So again, question 6 is very important. And we certainly encourage you to use a bullet format. Question 7 is also an opportunity for you to showcase what you're doing, because we're asking you to tell us what are the expected outcomes of the program for your target population. Do you expect to see increase in reading level scores? Do you expect to see children's greater appreciation of art? Do you expect to house a certain number of people? Do you expect that a certain number of your target group will obtain gainful employment? Do you expect that you will address a community need related to the environment or mental health issue? What are the expected outcomes? How would you recognize success? And question 8 allows you to expand on the expected outcomes, because we ask, along with benefiting your target population, do you anticipate additional benefits? In the past, we've learned from grant applications that when agencies work with parents, children have a direct benefit. When some family member obtains gainful employment, that can have a ripple effect in the family and possibly the community as the community becomes more resourced. In addition, some of the proposals in the past are seeking funding to innovate with new service models. And though the authors of those proposals have claimed that if their program is considered a success, what they're doing can serve as a model for social services in that area. So again, question 8 allows you to go beyond the immediate benefits to the target population and tell us if you anticipate other positive expected outcomes. Question 9 asks applicants to tell us how they plan to evaluate the program. What kind of data are you going to collect? Are you going to collect data about reading scores? Are you going to collect data about rates of drug use? Are you going to collect data about how many people are being employed? And we also ask here in question 9, for the data you collect, how will you use that data to conclude success? We certainly understand that none of us is 100% successful in life. So if you may say, we are working with a very high-risk population, if we can support half of our population to obtain gainful employment, we will consider this intervention a success. Statements like that are perfectly acceptable. We want you to tell us, given the rich experience you all have, what you would consider to be a success. And finally, in question 9, we ask you to identify the person who will conduct the application, and conduct the evaluation. You're probably all going to be working on the application. And it's fine if you say we will designate someone should we get funding. Just tell us what the kind of credentials you would be seeking for the evaluator. So thank you. we ask you here to list each person who has any role with the proposed program. Oftentimes, a senior level staff member is assigned to supervise the program. So his or her salary could be charged off with a small portion of his or her salary could be charged off. But in here, you would certainly want to identify the person with the ultimate responsibility for supervising. I'd like to just mention here that we would anticipate that every person who's identified in question 10 will be accounted for in the budget. And my colleague Susan Altman will go into the budget in more detail. But my comment here is a heads up. Question 11 asks what is the total proposed budget for the program, including Garden State. Oftentimes, we have funded programs that is awarded the $100,000, but that $100,000 was supplemented with other grant funding and or agency resources. So if the response here is a minimum of $100,000, and if you're using additional funds, include those funds when you report the total budget. Thank you. Question 12 has to do with the program budget. So I will move away from that because Susan Altman will take care of that. The final two questions that I'm going to discuss do not apply generally do not apply. Every year is different, but generally do not apply to all applicants. But for those for whom they apply, they're very important. Here at Impact, our goal is to have finalists hit the ground running and start implementing their program immediately. And our grants administration team gives a lot of concentrated time right after our annual awards meeting to work out a payment plan, and so you can get going. And what we found through the years is that often agencies will say, well, we're going to work with this school, or we're going to work with this law enforcement agency. And then it takes 3 or 4 months to negotiate that collaboration. What we are now expecting is that applicants identify in question 13 every organization with whom they're going to collaborate, be it a school, a hospital, a law enforcement agency, any kind of other government agency, whatever. And that should those applicants advance in the grant review process, we would go back to those applicants by mid-March and say, you've identified this school district. We want a memorandum of agreement from this school district that they are ready and willing to collaborate with you to implement this project. So here, again, we're just asking for the names we're saying other entities because some of them are not social service agencies. And then we will follow up with you should you advance in the grant review process. And question 14 picks up on what Jennifer mentioned in her remarks, and that is that we encourage joint applications. These are applications where 2 or more nonprofits agree to split our $100,000 grant. And in those instances of joint applications, we ask for further information about the two or more could be applicants. And that's spelled out here. We have contact information and a little bit about how you would divide money and spend it. So that is a brief walkthrough. Finally, we ask you on question 15 to attest that everything that you have reported it is accurate and sort of seals the deal, as it were. So we ask you to make that certification. So thank you very much. And now I'll turn to this to Susan Altman. And I really want to give a shout out to the Finance Committee because they too heard your feedback and have done some wonderful work, I think, in helping, supporting everyone to present a clear budget. So Susan, it's all yours once Jennifer pushes the right buttons.
That's great, and thank you so much, Louise, for those kind words. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Artman. I'm a member of the Finance Review Committee, and I'll be reviewing with you the budget and the financial requirements. First, in talking about the budgets, it's important that you submit a budget that, number one, is consistent with the narrative and the program that, as you've described it. Two, that it's sufficient to support the program, that meaning that it's got the appropriate amount of revenue and expenses. Thirdly, that it's achievable. And fourth, that it's clear and accurate. We like to see things that don't have typos and the numbers add up as they should appropriately. In the slide that's being presented here, it's an illustration. You don't have to follow this exactly, but we do want something quite similar to this, and it should include the key features and have sufficient level of detail to allow our reviewers to fully understand how our $100,000 will be spent. So let's walk through this in a little bit more detail. Please present your budgets in whole dollars, no pennies, please. And in this example, we've assumed that the program actually requires more than $100,000. If your program is within the $100,000, you don't need to necessarily include the first column, the total program budget, but you will need to provide the Impact 100 budget request in 1, 2, 3 years, whatever is appropriate for your application. On the revenue side, again, you can see here that it's the program is more than $100,000. And parenthetically, we would ask you, if this is your situation, to include what additional funds will be required, whether those are funds that you have in hand, or that they're funds that you have been committed to you, or potential funding. If it is potential funding, we would like to have you add any comments you have in terms of the likelihood of when you'll hear back on those commitments. When we look at the expense side, I'd like to call particular importance to the salaries and the personnel cost. One of the issues we frequently have is that the salaries and the number of people don't match up with the number of people or the people called out to support the program in item 10 of the application. So please make sure that that's consistent. We ask that you list in the budget the individuals and or their titles, and again, the salary based on the percentage of the time that is being allocated to the program. You can see in this illustration, there are 3 people. The first one, Mary, is dedicated at 10%, John at 100%, and Bill at 80%. And again, those salaries, that's the percentage of their total salaries. I'd also like to point out that in addition to salaries of the personnel, we'd like to see a sufficient level of details in other expenses related to the program. 1 or 2 items may not be sufficient. So again, please put as much detail that will be helpful for us to understand how the program will not only be funded, but how the $100,000 or the entire program expenses will be expended. As was mentioned before, the expenses may include capital expenditures. And while we don't fund overhead expenses per se, we do recognize that programs do consume overhead resources like rent, utilities, and technologies. So certainly a reasonable allocation of those expenses is acceptable. Moving on to the financial statements. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, the Finance Review Committee does conduct a thorough review of the financial condition of the applicants. And to do that, we need the following information. First, we need 2 years of audited or reviewed financial statements. We will not, unfortunately, be able to accept compiled financial statements. Those are statements that have not either been reviewed or prepared by a third party. In addition to the audited or reviewed financial statements, we will also need to have interim or internal financial statements from the last date of the audit or review to the most recent interim date, preferably December 31st of 2021. And whether it is the reviewed or unreviewed statements, we need full sets of financial statements. That includes balance sheet, profit and loss, and cash flow statements. One of the first things we'll do in our review is we will look to see that we have got a complete set of financials required. And while we do not like to disqualify anybody for not sending all the appropriate financials, we will work actively with the finance contact person to ensure that we receive all the data required. We hope that the next chart we provide will make it more clear and helpful for you to understand exactly what is needed. The chart provides 3 examples, probably the most common examples of statements that we receive with fiscal years ending June 30th, fiscal year ending September 30th, and fiscal year ending December 31st. The first column attachment will be referred to in the next few slides in terms of how those statements are attached with your application. Let's go through each of these columns briefly. The June 30th is rather straightforward. We would expect, or it's most likely, that the audited statements for June 30th of 2001 are completed. So that will be your first year. The second year will be the previous year, June of 2020. And the interim statements that would need to be provided would be from July 1st of 2021 to December 31, 2021. And then if we go over to the December column, it too is rather less complicated, I'll say, than other fiscal year ends. We would probably not expect that the audited financial statements for December 31st, 2021 would be available by the date of February 4th, the due date of the application. Therefore, the audited statements would be the December 20th, year 2020 and December of 2019. And then interim statements would need to be provided for the full year 2021. So again, June and December are rather straightforward. Other year ends, such as September 30th, can get a bit more complicated. Again, if the September 2021 audited or reviewed financials are available, those would be submitted along with the September 2020 statements. And then interim statements would then need to be provided from October 1st of 2021 to December 31st, 2021. It gets a bit more complicated if, however, the 2021 audited statements are not available. And you'll see an example of what is required in the parens of that column, with the biggest difference being that in the interim statements, 2 interim statements would need to be provided, both the fiscal year ending September of 2021 and an additional interim statement from October to the end of the year, fiscal year September 30, 2021. So again, hope that is helpful. And as mentioned before, we will certainly review for completeness. If something is not completed, we'll reach out and work with your financial team. But we would ask if you please would also, in preparing your application, work closely with your financial representatives to ensure that those applications are full and complete. And with that, I'll turn it over to Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Impact Team, for sharing information on this year's application. So we have just a few more slides to go, and we invite you to please enter any thoughts or questions that you may have in the chat box, and we'll get to them shortly. I'd like to point out that earlier in this program, Louise mentioned that we had received some feedback. So for those of you who were not with us last year, we conducted our first ever survey of applicants, and that survey provided some really helpful information to us in understanding the nonprofits in our community and in preparing this year's application. So if you do choose to apply this year, please be on the lookout for a survey that will help us to inform our application review process for the coming year. And thank you to those who took the time to answer the survey last year as well. So here's the list of attachments in a checklist form that we've gone over today. When your documents are prepared, you'll be able to upload them here as you click on Add File. Once you are ready to submit, please be sure to hit the Save Progress again, just for good measure, and then Submit Form. If you're missing any information or attachments, our system will alert you with a pop-up. And just to be clear, it'll direct you to any empty fields that need to be completed. And this will also show up with a red outline or a red asterisk. After pressing Submit, you will receive a receipt confirmation. You will also receive a grant application received email from Impact 100 Garden State, stating that your application was received. If you do not receive that confirmation email to your registered email address after submitting, please reach out to grants at Impact 100 Garden State as soon as possible so we can do some research on that for you. So thank you for listening, and we're going to check the chat box to see if any questions have come in, and we'll open up to any questions. Feel free to send them to me, to my wonderful colleagues, or to the full group. I see Jennifer's back on screen. Let me take a peek.
There was a question about making requests to other impact chapters, and I'm not sure I followed up individually, but want the whole group to know that you can certainly take a look at those eligibility requirements by impact chapter. If you are making a similar request to another impact chapter, we also have different grant cycles, so there typically hasn't been, doesn't mean there couldn't be, but there haven't been conflicts in terms of timing and requests, to my knowledge, over the history of Garden State. But if you are making similar requests to other impacts, we would want you to mention that in your proposal, just to be transparent with us. But given what the other chapters focus on, their counties and their requirements, that hasn't been a problem to date. And certainly you can reach out to grants at impact100gardenstate.org with any questions about that if you're taking a look at other opportunities across the Jersey impact landscape.
All right, so for those of you who have not seen the chat box, there was a question asking whether or not we share the evaluation rubric. And we just want to state that we do not share the rubric, but it does mirror the application. And if Louise would like to say anything about the rubric or the application.
No, you've handled it very nicely. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And we have a question that I'd like to have Susan's input on, if we could. It's a financial question. They just hit the requirement to have our financials audited, so they may only have 1 year of audited statements. Is that a problem, or would they have to wait another year?
Yeah, we do need 2 years of audited financials. So, and again, and if there are, it sounds like it's a new organization possibly. So yes, we would need 2 years.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Susan. And Jen, will slide 45 be available? It's the breakdown of the financial statements. Is it on the application or is it, where can that be found?
It's in a couple of places because of our amazing financial review committee. So on our website, under the frequently asked questions, you'll see the table that Susan went through so eloquently. And then there's also a link, I believe, I hope I'm not misspeaking. I think there's a way to link to it as you get into the application to take a look at those interims. And then again, anyone who's registered for this session, you will receive a recording of the session. So you could see it there. You can also reach out to grants at impact100gardenstate.org. We'll make sure you have that table. But you should be able to see the table on our grant web pages.
And Cindy, if I could just re-clarify when I answered that response earlier, we will accept audited, but also reviewed statements. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to have an audit opinion, but the statements would need to be prepared by someone independent or outside the organization. So again, they can be audited or reviewed, and we do need 2 years of either audited or reviewed. We just don't accept compiled, which would be, they would just be compiled internally by someone. So there has to be a third party involved in it. So I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Susan. And for the nonprofit asking that question, please feel free to email us if you need any further clarification, and we can get back to you on that. So we have another question. The organization is a small public, okay, now it's jumping, small public library, and the Friends of the Library is a 501c3 group that would like to apply. If I'm reading correctly, the library would not be a partner because we are a municipal entity. It looks like all partner organizations must be nonprofit. Am I following that correctly? Maybe Jen, you can help with that?
Sure. So the agency making the request must be 501c3 with that tax designation. So if the library is working with the Friends of, to your question, the Friends of could conceivably apply if they meet those other requirements in terms of financials and our other guidelines. And there may be some other thoughtful ways for you to work with other entities that have that C3 designation, or we can learn more about how you're structured. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if I could jump in here, it sounds like if the Friends of the Library is going to apply, they would list as another entity the public library, the government or the municipal agency, and indicate that they have an agreement to work together.
Great, thank you, Jennifer and Louise. One more question came in about work areas. So if the program serves multiple counties, 3 within our jurisdiction and 2 outside the jurisdiction, does the program need to be limited to only the counties within our jurisdiction, or could we include the external as well? And I'd like to say that my understanding is as long as you are in one of our 5 counties and serve our 5 counties, then you may apply. Louise, am I correct? Jen?
Well, it certainly can apply. I think we'd have to think about whether the impact monies could be used out to serve people outside of our 5 counties. But certainly I would encourage, if you were serving that many counties, I think practically speaking, your budget would exceed $100,000. So display the $100,000 of impact funding to be used within our catchment area.
Right, so the dollars need to be spent in our catchment area.
But certainly expanding the program beyond is okay. Just our money goes with our catchment areas.
Great, thank you.
Good question.
Yeah. Thanks, Louise. Here's a good question. Does Impact prefer certain sized organizations as their preferred grantees? Can someone on our team take that? Is there a size preference?
No, we've funded a range of sizes.
And we have one more question. Joint applications. Can someone, maybe Jennifer or Louise, can you talk a little bit about joint applications? I know you mentioned it earlier, but just to clarify.
Do you want to take it, Jennifer?
Sure. I think the only thing I'd add to Louise's example is that so as you stipulate in the application which organization would serve as the lead and which is the partner, there may be a question about what to do with those partner financials. And currently the way that we are managing that would be that those partner financials would be sent separately to the grants@impact100gardenstate.org email address. But again, this is just a way for two entities to share that transformative grant, given some intentionality around that relationship that you would describe in the application.
Well, thank you. And it looks like we've expired all of the questions that have come in both to everyone and privately. So if anyone has any additional questions, I know this is a lot of information to digest on a Tuesday morning. So if anything comes to you, please feel free to reach out to us at grants@impact100 State, and we'll be happy to get back to you. And at this point, I guess I'll turn it back to Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks, Impact team, and everyone who's taken time this morning, becoming afternoon, to be with us and learn more about our process. Would just encourage you, for those of you who are ready to get into the application, as Cindy said, it's live. You can get in and save your progress. So we know with financials, sometimes your requests in terms of what you're planning to do when our grant cycle, when the awards would be, the award dollars would be implemented, doesn't always line up with planning and when your financials are ready. So we would encourage you to just get into the application. As you have questions or getting closer to that February deadline, feel free to reach out to us, and then you can add those attachments to your application package. And again, know that you can submit any time from now until February. So for those of you who are ready and your fiscal year lines up in such a way that you could submit earlier than that February deadline, feel free to do so. And then you know what? For those that are still on, let me do a final poll if you don't mind. Thanks, Cindy. I forgot. Here we go. Would just love to get a temperature read on those who may have a sense of whether you're going to submit a proposal this year. Oh, great. Ooh, I love that. Look at that, team. Can everyone see that? We've got a majority of yesers. And some who are still mulling it over, which is reasonable. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to us to learn more and get some more clarity. All right, let's see. Any final questions? All right, no. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes.
All right, be well. Happy almost Thanksgiving. Enjoy the holiday season. Can't believe we're already here.